Hi everyone, welcome back to the garden. And before I start talking about the exciting plants, I obviously wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who watched my section on Gardener's World on Friday. I've had hundreds of amazing comments, so many really kind messages. It's seriously been overwhelming. And if I had an ego, it would literally be the size of a house right now. Personally, I thought they put together a great little section. They obviously wanted to focus on the accessibility side, how easily you can create a jungle effect in your own garden, and how even just spending a few pounds on some seeds, some fast growing plants, they can really fill out quickly over just one summer. And in today's video, it's back to business as usual. I wanted to show you my top 30, 40, maybe even 50 plants for creating the jungle effect. Obviously not every single plant, there's hundreds to choose from, but the ones that I've had great success with here and the way that I create this tropical effect here in Lincolnshire. So let's get started. But firstly, a little surprise for you. I know a lot of you were disappointed, disgusted even, that Max, our miniature Dachshund, didn't make Friday's episode. He didn't have the starring role that he was born to have. And unfortunately, I think when the filming crew came, a garden full of new people, he'd have just wanted to play all day long, and potentially not a lot of film would have got done. But there's a surprise for you, and I'll show you right now. This is Remy. Hello, Remy. Remy is a new puppy who's joined the family. He's 6 months old, he's a miniature Dachshund like Max, and Remy is probably the most confident, naughtiest dog ever. So we've definitely got our hands full. If the BBC couldn't cope with one Dachshund, now Max has come out, I'm gonna have to cope with two. This year is definitely gonna be a little bit full on. But anyway, enough about the dogs, let's get on to the plants. If you saw my section on Friday and want to create a jungle style garden yourself, then this is the video for you. Unlike Gardener's World, where they have to create a 6 or 7 minute section, I want to go in more detail today. I want to have all the plant names on the screen and then also give you a few crucial care tips for each plant. So it's a bit of an overview, but just a general look at the kind of plants I rely on here to create that lush, leafy look all the way through the year. I want to start off with the evergreen plants, the plants that bring that structure and interest all the way through the winter, and then the ones that I look for in early spring, and finally the ones that really bring the colour, the huge leaves and that lush foliage later on in the summer. So let's get started with some evergreens first. If you're looking to start growing your own tropical or jungle style garden here in the UK, there's one group of plants I think are a must-have, the hardy palms. Yes, we can grow palms here in the UK, and probably the best one to start with is a Trachycarpus fortunei. I know a lot of you will know this plant, and I'll link in the description below to several videos I've done all about these. They're a fantastic plant for creating that lush jungle effect. You get amazing growth, they can grow from a small plant relatively quickly, so you soon get something that sizes up. The leaves get to over 1 metre long, and you get these fantastic yellow flowers in spring. It's a cracking plant to use as a backdrop, as a statement piece, or even have a few to create some real height in your garden. Personally, I think if you're growing a tropical garden here in the UK, something like this needs to be your first priority. And if you've got a windier garden, well, I'll show you an even better alternative. This plant here then is a Trachycarpus wagnerianus, or wacky palm as most people call them. It's just as tough, just as hardy almost as the standard Trachycarpus fortunei, but this one is so much better if you've got quite a windy or exposed garden, because the leaves are so much stiffer. They really hold themselves well, and no matter how much rain, snow or wind they get, this is a plant that looks great all the way through winter. But any Trachycarpus is a great choice if you want to grow something you don't have to worry about winter protection for. These are plants that thrive in our cool, damp UK climate, and it's important to remember that plants like this, they're not proper desert plants, they're not really Mediterranean style plants, and palms like this to grow best, they really do appreciate a good bit of water, particularly during the summer months. Both the fortunei and waggy palms, they can both tolerate a variety of different garden conditions in terms of soil as well as light levels. But if you've got very free draining soil, or if you live in an especially exposed coastal location, then probably this is the palm for you. This is a Camarops or Shamrops or Keemrops. However you want to pronounce it, this is a Mediterranean dwarf fan palm. Unlike the other two, which just grow up as a single trunk, this one's more of a bushy sort of form. And what it actually does, it has these suckers from the base, and gradually over time it'll form a clump like that. But it's a very slow growing palm in comparison. Don't get me wrong, if you plant something this size, it'll get to a bush maybe 3 foot by 3 foot within perhaps 5 years, but it's certainly a good bit slower than the other two Trachycarpus. But this is a fantastic choice. If you want something you can plant in a well-drained, maybe a raised border or something like that, even a pot, this is the one I'd go for. And if you want something a little bit different again, you can get a version of this called Cerifera, which has got amazing sort of steely blue coloured fronds, And then you can also get a Vulcano, which is the same kind of thing, but with even more tightly packed leaves. It really does look fantastic, and no amount of wind is going to bother that. If you want to add a tropical vibe to your garden, I think any of those palms will be a fantastic choice. They're all easy to grow, they're all really tough plants, and they'll all get better and better every single year. So don't be afraid of planting small, let them develop nicely, and they'll soon be the specimen plant that you've always wanted. But for a lot of people, there's an exotic plant that really sums up the unusual, the crazy, the impressive, and it's a plant that can seriously add some height to your garden. It's bamboos. Now, I know these are a plant that's got a certain reputation. If you speak to some people, they will say they're invasive, they're monsters that will completely take over your garden. But if you speak to others, they'll say they're a fantastic plant. They can add height so quickly, they're great for screening, they have movement to the garden. And on windy days like today, when that wind's just blowing the leaves around, they just look so graceful, so impressive, and really transport you to another place. But there's a few tips that you can use to make sure you get the right bamboo for your garden. To summarise things in this video, if you want a monstrous bamboo with huge canes, the potential to grow canes that are 2 inches or more across here in the UK, then you want a Phylostachys. Those are the real big bamboos. And if you want a golden bamboo with proper impact, then this is the one you want. This is Phylostachys vivax aureocorlis, and it's an incredible plant. But with any Phylostachys, they're running bamboos, which means you need to take some precautions. They're probably not the best plant for a pot, because even in a big pot, they'll fill it relatively quickly, they'll need a huge amount of water, and you'll never get that real size you're wanting. In the ground, you can certainly see them size up every single year, but you need to have a barrier around them. Ultimately, these are plants that can take up a huge area. They can take up a sort of an area the size of most small gardens, and they really need to have a bit of room to stretch the legs if you want that proper size. If you haven't got the room, then personally what I'd recommend is using a proper bamboo barrier. You can buy rhizome barrier in rolls, and if you dig that into the ground around the bamboo, something maybe 700mm depth, use a 2mm barrier. I'll put a link to a video all about it in the description below. Then this bamboo, it really brings drama like no other plant. But there are some other bamboos that won't spread, ones that you don't need to give a rhizome barrier to, and ones that are relatively better for small gardens. Regular viewers will probably be fed up with me saying the name of this bamboo. This is Farfugium robusta Campbell, and this is probably my pick of a clumping bamboo. Now, it will still get pretty big. It'll probably get to maybe 3 or even more meters across, but it's a bamboo that grows predictably. And what you have is a clump, hence the name, and that expands slowly every single year. The new canes that pop up, the culms around the base, they grow rapidly, and what you find every year, they get taller, up to a height of around 4 meters. But it's a very upright bamboo, very well behaved, it looks great in winter. Personally, I'd ignore the horror stories. With a few precautions, either planting or choosing the right variety, bamboos can make a fantastic addition to your garden. As a general rule, if the bamboo name starts with Farfugium, it's a clumper, and that means that you know that bamboo is better for smaller spaces, and it can even be an option for pots. You will need a large pot, but they're completely worth it. This one here is Farfugium demissa Jerry, and if you want something a little bit different, this is bamboo that's got those sort of black canes like a larger Phylostachys and an amazing sort of purpley silver colour. So if you want something different, then this one is a fantastic choice. It's a relatively new bamboo, but worth searching for. Here on my channel, I have been doing loads of videos all about great beginner exotics, as well as the ones that are a little bit more interesting, a little bit rarer, and can really bring something unusual to your garden. But in that Gardener's World segment, I talked about a plant that I've mentioned a couple of times here. It's a great starter plant. If you want to start growing an exotic garden, if you've got a shady garden and want something very easy to look after, then this is a plant that will grow quickly and really capture that sort of lush houseplant vibe, but out in your garden. This is a Fatsia japonica. And just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's any less valued. Just because it's easy to grow doesn't mean it's any less rewarding. This is an incredible plant, and it's perfect for those shady spots. You can even grow it in containers. It grows relatively well for a good few years in a pot. But personally, I like dotting these throughout the garden. It's a great filler plant. And now I know filler plant is potentially a little bit unkind because these are plants that are incredibly beautiful. But personally, I think they're great for those shadier spots. Parts of your garden where it's maybe not the bit you look at when you first look out your window, but you still want something there. They're a great backdrop plant, and some of the flowers that I'll look at later in this video, those bright colours look incredible against these dark green leaves. And this is a plant that, like I said, it's relatively affordable. This one I got for £12.99. Now, I have mentioned in previous videos, you can get these for as little as £2, £3, £4, but personally, I've sort of changed my mind a bit. I'm perfectly happy to admit I'm wrong, and I think it's worth spending the extra tenner to get something like this. Something with quite a nice stem to it. I think they grow better from this size, and they're certainly a bit tougher against winter cold. It's a plant, like I said, it's very easy to grow, and probably the worst thing you might find in late winter, early spring, you'll get some damage to these newer leaves here, but don't worry about it. In a couple of months, new leaves will come out and you'll never even notice. It's a very strong growing plant and one that can shrug off pretty much any damage. So it's a fantastic choice for a low maintenance tropical garden, for a shady tropical garden, for a small tropical garden. This shrub is a fantastic one. If you like the Fatsia japonica look, but you're really looking for something a little bit more interesting to brighten up a shady corner, then this is Fatsia japonica spider's web. And as you can see, the new growth is almost pure white. It gradually becomes more and more green until the older leaves have got this interesting sort of white speckling around the edges. I know variegated plants, they're not to everyone's taste, but personally, I think that spider's web is certainly one of the more tasteful ones. It's a lovely looking plant, and just like the standard Fatsia japonica, it's a strong grower, it's a great backdrop plant, and it's great for having a real lush green garden. You can get spider's web that size for around £12 to £15 at most garden centres, so it's a great beginner plant if you're just starting out on your tropical garden journey and you want something that will thrive in a shady spot. And if you want something a little bit more interesting, you can even get this. This is Fatsia japonica variegata, and this one does look mostly green, but if you've got it in a shady spot, you get patches of white or this creamy colour on the leaves. So there's loads of interesting choices, and if you really want to hunt out something special, you can get Fatsia polycarpa, which is basically the opposite of a Fatsia, because on a Fatsia, the leaves start out matte and then become more glossy, and on a polycarpa, they come out glossy and gradually fade to a beautiful matte green. There's a couple of really interesting options, but personally, I think the Edward Needham Form, it's a really finely cut leaf and it looks incredible. So that's definitely worth looking for. This is my Edward Needham Form here, just nestled into this shady spot. It's really sized up nicely and I just love the shape of those leaves. But if you enjoy growing Fatsias, there's another plant that's slightly less common, but certainly incredibly graceful. It's got the same kind of vibe. And there's one up here. This is a Schefflera, or hardy umbrella tree. This one is Schefflera swelliensis, but I grow quite a few different types in the garden. Essentially, these are large shrubs, potentially even small trees, and they've got these fantastic leaves. Every spring, you get a flush of new growth, and they're relatively fast growers too. They can grow over a foot a year. They're fantastic plants to add a real bit of interest to a shady spot, to give a proper canopy to your garden in a few years' time. So this swelliensis, I think it's a lovely plant, but I also grow some others here too. Taiwaniana is probably the most well-known variety, with these beautifully elegant dark green glossy leaves, but there's a few others that I grow here that are definitely tough and I'd certainly recommend. Looking up in the undergrowth then, you'll see Schefflera rhododendrofolia. Again, it's a very tough plant, potentially as hardy as Taiwaniana, and another great choice if you want to try some of these exciting plants here in the UK. And moving this tree fern out of the way, you'll see down here, this is a Schefflera deleve, which personally is probably my favourite Schefflera. The leaves just look incredible, and these are all relatives of ivy, so it has fantastic winter flowers as well as potentially berries in the future. But the main reason you grow these plants is just for that foliage. They're an incredibly exotic plant, and if you've got a sheltered, shady or woodland style garden, a couple of these will really bring a touch of the exotic. But honestly, going back to the Taiwaniana, I just think they're an incredibly beautiful plant. Just look at this new growth, how graceful it is. I think a plant like this gives you something that you look forward to every single spring. And if you want to know more about growing these graceful umbrella plants, then check out my videos. I've done one all about care for hardy Schefflera plants. Every plant that I've looked at so far then is what I call a true evergreen. Plants that even though they come from all kinds of exotic locations, they thrive in our UK gardens and they'll remain green, vibrant and really bring that tropical vibe even in our UK winters. But there's one plant that should remain green, especially if you live in a mild area of the UK. And it's a plant that delivers on that with an incredible spring show. It's Dicksonia antarctica, the hardy tree fern. one of my staple garden plants here, a fantastic plant to grow, and this is why. In spring, you get this incredible growth, these new zingy fronds, and personally, I don't think there's any other plant that really brings that exotic vibe like a tree fern can. If you're interested in knowing more about these, I have done a full care guide all about tree ferns, watering, the best place to position them in your garden, as well as winter protection. So definitely, I'll put a link to that video in the description below. They're an incredible plants and something that really ties my garden together here. But I'm aware that tree ferns recently have got significantly more expensive. And if you've got a smaller garden or you can't quite justify the price of one of these beauties, then there's a lot of ground ferns that you can easily use to create the same kind of effect. I think ferns are a group of plants that they're entirely underrated. A lot more people should be growing them, and when they find somewhere where they're really happy, like this here, if you've got a damp, shady spot, there's nothing better than ferns to really add that lush green feel to it. And here in the garden, I grow plenty of different varieties. And in fact, I think it's that variety that really makes them such an incredibly useful group of plants. One that I think is especially beautiful is this one here. This is Pteris umbrosa, also known as a jungle brake. It's not the hardiest fern, but I think it's really an incredible looking plant. It almost looks like something out of Avatar, and it definitely ties in with the tree ferns, with the Schefflera. It's got that same kind of graceful, exotic jungle vibe. So that one, if you've got the right spot for it, it's definitely highly recommended. Yes, these shuttlecock ferns, they die down in winter and they don't quite last the full tropical garden season, but what they deliver in spring makes it completely worth growing them. They've got such a vibrant green energy to them, and personally, these are one of my absolute favourite ferns. I've got them dotted all around the garden. But there's a couple of really tough evergreen ferns that I think you'll really enjoy too. Dryopteris wallackiana. This is an incredibly beautiful fern. It's definitely a fern with real impact, and this can get to over 1 metre tall. So it's a fern that almost looks like a smaller tree fern, perfect for shady gardens, perfect for smaller gardens, and a good budget tree fern alternative. These are lovely. Joining that, we've got Dryopteris wallackiana Jurassic Gold. On this one, it might look green now, but that new growth in spring, it's got an amazing colour to it. It's almost like, as the name suggests, a beautiful sort of bronze gold colour. It's a fantastic plant, and definitely another really tough one, a good doer here in the garden. If you want something even more colourful, clearly Remy does, then this is a fantastic fern. This is Dryopteris erythrosaura Brilliance, and it's got these amazing new fronds. They're almost like a red burnished bronze colour. It's a fantastic plant, and what I found is, again, like the other Dryopteris, it's just a great tough plant. Even in spots that maybe get a little bit more sun than's optimal, even in places where the soil isn't completely moist all year round, this is a good performer, and it's a plant that I have all around the garden. I think with these ferns, just go round to a garden centre, see what they've got. But if you see one that you like and want to try growing, don't just get one, get a few of them, spread them round, and it can really tie your garden together. And if you like that red, but want something that's even more majestic, even more presence, then this Woodwardia is definitely one for you. Mine is only a young plant, but already these fronds are sizing up pretty rapidly, and this is a plant that will really be something unusual, something eye-catching. And I think, like I said with ferns, the best thing is just explore them, find some that really grab you and use them to decorate a shady area. There's no group of plants I think really sums up a jungle garden than having all these big leaves with ferns around them. They're a great filler plant, a great accessory plant, and something that really ties the garden together. We started off then by looking at some tough but amazing hardy evergreen exotics, plants that can deliver a low maintenance but high impact garden all the way through the year. We then looked at some that really deliver and bring a spring show. They might be green in winter, but the incredible growth in spring, it absolutely makes them worth growing, and there's something that I look forward to seeing every single year. But the truth is, there's loads more hardy exotics. Plants, for example, like this, which is a cordyline australis, incredibly common. You can get it at pretty much any garden centre, supermarket these days, but for less than a tenner, you're getting a plant that's got the potential to be a real specimen in just a few years. They size up so quickly, these, and generally speaking, cordylines, they actually trunk and they'll form either one solitary trunk, they might branch a bit, but these are a plant that wants to grow upwards. If you've got a sunny garden, if it's quite exposed, then something like this is a fantastic choice for adding height, and it's a plant you don't need to worry about protecting. And personally, I think the standard green form, they're definitely the toughest, the easiest and fastest to grow, but there are other forms like Torbay Dazzler. So if you live somewhere milder, maybe on the south coast around London, or your garden's a bit of a microclimate, it's well worth trying some of the more unusual ones. There's some fantastic colours there. And just like cordylines, phormiums are generally follow the same rules. Phormiums, unlike cordylines, they're more of a clumping plant, but some of them do get really big. So the 10x forms can easily get to 3 meters wide, 3 meters tall, but they deliver impact on a scale like few other plants can. So it's important to know the size of your garden, really choose the right variety. Do a bit of research beforehand. 10x as a general rule is a big plant. The smaller ones are Cuckianums. There's a few incredible different varieties of those, and they generally get to around 1 meter tall, so a lot more manageable. And just like the cordylines, if you want to try something more brightly coloured, something more unusual, something really zingy, then generally speaking, a more sheltered spot, a better microclimate, will see them through even the colder winters. The arrival of mid-spring then, that's when the magic really starts to begin. That's when the big leaves grow and a real tropical jungle garden absolutely comes to life. And it's a time of year when I'm nearly as excited as Remy is up here. I don't know what it is with Dachshunds wanting to be on my shoulder. I think they're just like the highest vantage point of being able to see the dogs next door. As you can probably see, Remy's a fair bit bigger than Max, so I think I'm going to put him down now. Come on, boy, come on. There we go. But as you can see behind me, regular viewers, you won't be surprised to see probably my favourite plant in the garden. This is Gunnera Manicata. And if you want an exotic jungle plant with real impact, this is the one you need to have. It's perfect for a moist garden, a damp, shady spot, and you need to make sure you leave enough room because the leaves on this thing, they get colossal. Some of the leaves last year were nearly 2 meters, and this year it's already nearly that size, and we're only in mid-May. So I don't know how big it's going to get this year, but I'm certainly looking forward to it. Just to give you a quick preview then before my spring tour, as Remy's just shown you there for scale, look at the size of these leaves. They're already nearly as big as last year. And in fact, last year, my biggest leaf was in this exact same spot. So it's great for comparison purposes. But if I just move up here, the tree fern at the back there, it's a 7 or 8 foot trunk, and you can only just see the fronds poking out. So that gives you an idea of just how big these plants can get. Remy is incredibly amazed at just how much of the garden they're taking up. And you don't just get these leaves. If you look down there at the rhizome, you've got these incredible stalks covered in these spines. I wouldn't say it's a beautiful plant or a pretty plant, but it's definitely a plant with impact. And here, if you look at the flowers, you'll see the biggest difference between Gunnera Manicata and the smaller Tinctoria. On the Gunnera Manicata, the flowers are like these. They're more open, whereas on a Tinctoria, they tend to be more tightly packed, almost like a toilet brush. But these are plants that, despite those kind of comparisons, I wouldn't have a garden without them. I think they're incredible plants, but they're very greedy and very thirsty. So if you've got well-drained soil, I would potentially say that there's better plants to grow. If you've got a shady, damp spot on the other hand, there's no plant that's going to deliver more impact than these. They're seriously incredible. How did you get a bear? Remy? No idea. If you like the Gunnera Manicata then, but haven't got quite enough space for that kind of madness, then there's a few plants also thrive in a damp, shady spot that I think you'll love. These down here are Regersia. Regersia are herbaceous perennials, which essentially means herbaceous, there's no woody part above the ground. Perennial, they come up every single year. So these are plants, they're not going to feature in your winter garden, but they just erupt in spring and provide so much of this green leafy background. They'd like somewhere that's well watered especially, but I think really they're a plant that's a great accessory to the other big leaved exotics. When the leaves first emerge, they're almost like this sort of metallic purple colour. This is a different variety here, but then gradually they evolve to this beautiful lush green. Even smaller still are the hostas. Again, beautiful lime green zingy leaves. There's so much variety and they're great for a shady spot. But chances are, if you're watching this channel, it's not these little hostas you're interested in. You want a monster. And probably the number one, the biggest hosta you can grow here in the UK. Mine, unfortunately, is hidden away under this Gunnera leaf at the minute. This is Empress Wu. It's a very strong, tough hosta, and this one gets colossal. It can easily get to 5 foot across with these huge, great big blue-green leaves. It's an incredible plant and one that's definitely very prolific at growing. You can see there, I could divide that and probably get 10 individual plants, but in all honesty, I just don't have the room. When you see it through here, tucked in, it definitely fits in with that exotic jungle vibe, and even with a little bit of slug and snail damage, it certainly brings those leaves that lush green tropic effect. Mine has been eaten quite a bit this spring, but at the back there you can see a hosta summoned substance. This one is similar to the Empress Wu in its stature, not quite as big, but still well over a metre across. And it's got an interesting sort of yellowy green colour to the leaves. I think they're all fantastic plants, but definitely fit in with that exotic vibe. And if you haven't got the room for one of these Gunnera monstrosities, then the hostas are definitely a great way of achieving that look, that same kind of impact, those lush green leaves, and you don't have to worry about them at all in winter. Whereas the Gunnera, what I do for that, I've done videos all about my winter protection, but you essentially have to chop all the leaves down and use them to cover the crown. So they're both very tough plants, but the hosta doesn't take any care whatsoever. If you like the big leaf look, but haven't got a complete bog garden, then this is the plant for you. This is a Tetrapanax papyrifera rex. They're an incredible plant, very prehistoric looking, with leaves that get to 1.5 meters across. This one's a young plant, but in just a year, one single summer, they can get to something like this one here. They are deciduous here in the UK, and I've done a guide all about growing them. But I think if you want a taller plant with impact, these colossal leaves like dinosaur claws, this is only a baby. In just a few years' time, this will be towering over the other exotics here. They can easily get to 4 or 5 meters tall. This is a plant with complete impact. And if you enjoy your big leaves, but want something slightly more refined, then I'd highly recommend Zantedeschia White Giant Hercules. They've got these beautiful white flowers like a normal Zantedeschia, but just on a completely different scale. These are plants that can easily get to 1.5 meters tall, with flower spikes that are 6 foot, even taller than that. They're an incredible plant with real impact, but for these, a shadier, sheltered spot is best. They are relatively tough, and here I've had even small plants through -5, -6, and they've grown back again the following spring. But if you can give them a bit of protection, or if you live in colder areas, maybe dig them up and bring them into a greenhouse, then they'll reward you with a faster start the next spring and even bigger leaves. They're seriously a stunning plant. If you're looking for plants then to tie these incredible hardy exotics together, then personally I think Persicaria is a great choice. This one here is Persicaria Red Dragon, a plant that dies down in winter. Again, I've done a care guide all about these, but I think the reality is for these plants, they certainly don't need a lot in the way of care. They're very strong growers, and as soon as the frosts are finished, they'll be growing up again. And this red dragon can get to over 1 meter tall. They're a very, very rampant plant. They're not invasive, and whilst they are a relative of knotweed, they're nowhere near the same scale of invasiveness. This is a strong growing plant, and one that's very easy to divide, to split, and to spread around the garden yourself. And I think in all honesty, this is a plant that I'd really want more of in the garden. They're a great backdrop, they're a great filler plant, they're a great plant to have between the other exotics. You can chop them back without any guilt, and those purple leaves, they really fit the exotic vibe. So I think they're a great choice. Looking down here, you can really see how the use of colour can really bring a tropical garden to life. From zingy ferns through to the beautiful blue-green hostas, and then we've got the red dragon. And to me, this colour, the purple, it really ties in with the foliage plants as well as the other flowers that we'll be looking at soon. So this one is definitely one of my favourites, and as well, I also grow Purple Fantasy, which is the one that I feature on Gardener's World because I think these dark chevrons on the leaves, they make a really dramatic appearance. It's a plant that's definitely going to be more popular over the next few years. A very strong grower, very easy grower. It tolerates shade quite well, but if you give it a sunnier spot, you get even more of these fantastic patterns. So again, another plant that's highly recommended. On the theme of strong growers, this is a giant miscanthus. Well, you can probably guess by the name, it's Miscanthus giganteus. This is a grass that starts growing around April time, but races upwards towards the sky and can easily get to 6 foot plus tall in a single summer. So if you're looking for some instant screening, if you're looking for a backdrop of green that isn't a bamboo, then this miscanthus, it's a great plant. And it's also very easy to divide. So next spring, I can split this up, get multiple plants to spread around the garden. I think if you're looking for a plant that could really give a great backdrop to other exotics, something that isn't necessarily up all winter but looks great in summer, then this is a fantastic choice. Crocosmia Lucifer, definitely a common plant, but it's another plant that delivers that grass kind of look, but then it has amazing red flowers in summer. So this is an all-round great plant for the whole tropical theme. It's a bulb that you can plant that definitely delivers the impact. And for a tropical or jungle style garden, I think those bright zingy colours, they really show off the foliage. Remy obviously prefers the bamboos. I don't know what he's chomping on now, but I'm certainly going to keep my eye on him a little bit more than Max. You good boy, Remy? Good boy. No, he's fed up with me. Probably just wants to sleep. Remy! There we go. Good boy. For a smaller garden, maybe even containers or a shadier spot, there's loads of smaller sedges. These are readily available in a lot of garden centres and even supermarkets. And then there's this lovely grass here. This is Hacanocloa macra, the Japanese forest grass. It's a relatively small grass, but it will form a nice clump in time. And it's perfect for a shady, sheltered spot. And I use it to really soften the edges. So here, you've got it next to that lovely log. I like the way it just hangs over it really gracefully, and it definitely brings that jungle vibe. Variegated forms are definitely available too, and you can really see now, looking at this small jungle garden area, I planted this up as part of my POV small garden pond video, and you can really see the kind of plants that I run through the garden. So you've got the grasses, you've got the ferns, the persicaria, the hostas, the Gunnera. I suppose at first glance, a bed or border like this, it can look quite complicated. But the reality is, once you know which plants perform well for you, which plants are strong growers, and how to knit them all together, it's really easy to bring a jungle garden to life. So we've seen then a selection of exotics, or at least exotic looking plants, that can bring big leaves and vibrant energy to your spring garden. But as we head now into early summer, it's time for the real tropicals to shine. The giant leaves can come to the garden. And personally, I don't think there's any other plant that I'd rather have in a summer tropical garden than a banana plant. And here are two of the best. This one, firstly, is Ensete ventricosum Maurelii, the red or Abyssinian banana. And again, I've done videos all about these. I'll link to them in the description below. So this plant has to coincide for winter. During winter, it actually shrivels down a fair bit, so this plant doesn't look especially impressive now. But in just a few short weeks, this plant will be pushing new leaves out. The growth that these can put on over summer is seriously incredible. These leaves can get to over 1.5 meters long, and they have all kinds of different colours in them. And like I said on Gardener's World, seeing the sun behind these shining through, it brings out such an array of oranges and reds. They're probably the most ornamental and impressive plant you can grow in the UK. But if you want a banana that you can leave in the ground all year, the Musa Basjoo is definitely the one for you. This is a Musa here. And as you can see, it's got a completely different look to it. The leaves are green, they're longer, they're held in a different way. And this is a plant that can stay out in your garden all year long. In some colder areas or colder winters, some kind of protection does help to keep that height. But in lots of areas now, especially in these modern milder winters, this is a plant that can cope with pretty much any kind of temperature, a huge amount of snow, and still grow away in spring. Admittedly, the new growth that does start, you don't really see any strong leaves till either mid-May or early June, but that's not a problem because these are plants that put out leaf after leaf in summer. They get colossal in no time at all. So if you want a plant with impact, something that your neighbours, your friends won't have seen before, you can't go far wrong with a banana plant. Here we have a rare moment, we have a sleeping Remy. He's probably the most full-on dog. He just runs around the whole garden. He's a little bit bigger than Max, like I said, but in terms of enthusiasm, he's on a whole different planet. So we're definitely going to be a little bit wary with Remy, but he's certainly, like all Dachshunds, a proper character. This year we've had a kind spring, so it's been time to plant the Ensete out over the past week. But as you can see around the base, we've got bare earth. And the last thing you need in a jungle garden is soil. You want as many plants in as possible. I think the important thing is to create a jungle effect. It's as much about the way you plant the plants as actually what they are. So you really want some dense leafy planting. And this next week, I'll be planting out some of my more tender summer plants. So basically, I use house plants as bedding. Colocasia, Alocasia, they're great choices. And personally, if you want the hardy Colocasia, the one I would absolutely recommend is Colocasia Pink China. That has the same look as some of the more tender varieties, but you can leave it in your ground all year. And again, if you want to know a video all about it, then I'll link to one in the description below. But the other plant that's a mainstay of my summer garden, it's Ricinus. A huge plant you can grow from seed in April or May that gets to 6, 7, even 8 foot in a single year. That seriously is incredible, and it goes so well with these Ensetes. The collection of big leaves, it absolutely captures that tropical jungle vibe. By now then, you've got an incredible tropical garden. All these huge leaves set against the backdrop of hardy exotics, it'll be an incredible jungle display. And whilst the jungle is mostly about the leaves, it's now time to inject some more colour. It's time for the flowers. And two of my favourites, probably again must-haves in a tropical style garden, are gingers and cannas. Now, ornamental gingers, Hedychium, they're a plant that I really enjoy growing here. They're definitely stars of the late summer and early autumn show because they can take a while to really get going. But when they do, they're completely worth the wait. Personally, the variety that I grow here, or have grown with success, is Hedychium gardnerianum, which has got fantastic flowers. And I think, in all honesty, when it comes to the most exotic looking flowers that you can grow here in the UK, they've definitely got to be up there. And the scent that comes off them as well, it makes coming out into the garden on those late and long summer evenings seriously a thing to enjoy. So alongside those, cannas are the other mainstay of a tropical garden. With cannas, you get the amazing leaves, that huge growth, as well as the incredible flowers. So again, they're a must-have in a tropical style garden. And if you want some really strong growing varieties, Russian red is fantastic. Musifolia, it's great for the banana-like leaves and the sheer size of the thing. I've done a video all about it, but they can get to nearly 3 meters tall in a single summer. That is seriously impressive. And then on top of that, there's all kinds of smaller varieties with different and unusual foliage. Stuttgart is a variegated one that's definitely an impressive thing, but potentially needs a little bit of shade to really grow it well. And there's so many smaller varieties too. So if you want a tropical bit of colour, some flowers for a small pot, you can't go far wrong with cannas. And the best thing with all these plants is they're really tough too. So this year I've actually left a lot of them in the ground, but if you live somewhere that's a bit colder, you can dig them up, put them in pots, just leave them in a cold greenhouse or polytunnel. That's all you need to do. Don't let them completely dry out, but then in spring, as soon as they start to grow with the increased warmth, give them more water, a bit of food, and they start to race away again. So they're certainly plants I enjoy here in the garden. And if you really want to keep that colour flowing in your garden, you really want to go all out on a vibrant tropical display, then I would also include salvias. I've done a video all about Salvia Amistad. Purple, vibrant flowers. It brings the bees into the garden non-stop, and it grows well from small plants too. So that's definitely a favourite of mine, even though I've only grown it a year. And then the other group of plants I'd include are Dahlias. Now, last year I grew quite a few different ones, including Bohemian Spartacus, which has huge, great big flowers. But in all honesty, Dahlias are something I've evolved my thinking on. And going forwards, the varieties that I'm going to include are the single flowers, the ones you can grow from seeds, basically anything as part of the Bishop range. Because with those, you get a plant that not only looks great for you, but it's fantastic for the pollinators too. And as well as that, there's a practical benefit. Because the flowers aren't quite as big and showy, they don't need to be staked up with canes, you can just leave them to do their thing. And with a lot of Dahlias, you don't just get the flowers again, you get the foliage too. So what you might see is, with a lot of these flowering plants, you're not just growing them for the bright zingy colours. Sure, they're great, but you only have flowers for a week or two at a time. Some plants like the Salvia admittedly keep going for months, but it's also about the full package. You want a plant that's got the flowers and the leaves to really fit the jungle theme. And those four, Dahlias, Salvias, Cannas, Gingers, they're some of the best. If you're wanting something slightly less showy, then heucheras, they're a fantastic way of bringing the colour, but definitely fitting in with a certain colour scheme. And the flowers are more subtle, but they still definitely fit in with that jungle theme. Nasturtiums are a plant you might have seen on Gardener's World. I talk about them as a great budget choice. And this year, I'll be planting them even later than last year. I'll be pushing them straight into the ground over this next week. I just literally make a hole with a cane, drop a few seeds in and leave them to it. They're a great filler plant and they really tie in with the other exotic planting. But really, everything I've looked at so far, it's just been a taster of what you can grow here in the UK. A few ideas for the tropical or exotic theme. But the reality is, there's so many other choices available. If you've got a large garden, eucalyptus, they certainly bring that exotic vibe. With their graceful leaves, lovely scent, incredible flowers, I think they're a tree that deserves to be planted more. Euphorbia are a plant that I haven't even touched on, and I will be doing a video about very soon. This is Frampton Fatty, which is quite an incredible looking thing, but also John Phillips is one I definitely recommend. And then we've got the feather palms. Now, the reason I didn't talk about these in the beginning is because they're not quite as tough, quite as hardy as the Trachycarpus. But if you've got a more sheltered garden, you live somewhere milder, then something like this Boutia will be a perfect choice. Not quite as tough, we've got Phoenix canariensis. And again, this is a great palm for really tying together that gap between jungle and Mediterranean. They're a very fast grower, and this is a plant that can get seriously big. So make sure you have a quick Google and see what mature specimens look like before you choose where to plant it. But if you've got a sunny spot and you live somewhere on the south coast, around London, or potentially even further north these days, this is a fantastic choice for those lush green leaves. Today's video is more about jungle plants, but if you've got a sunnier garden or you really want a garden that bridges that gap between tropical and exotic Mediterranean vibe, then personally I think Euphorbia John Phillips with these huge flower heads, the scent of honey, the general appearance of this plant and how great it looks in winter make it a must-have. But heading through, there's other plants like yuccas, like echiums and the Jubea chilensis. This is a palm for a large garden, a slow grower, but incredible thing to see. So really, there's just so much choice. Whatever kind of garden you want to create, there's definitely exotics that can really fit in with the theme. So there we are then, loads of exciting exotic plant ideas so you can create your own tropical jungle paradise here in the UK. And I think the key thing to mention is this isn't everything, this is just a starting point. There's so many incredible exotic plants, so if you really want to create your own tropical paradise, if you want a modern exotic garden, or if you want a hybrid garden, an exciting wildlife or cottage garden with some key tropical plants in, then there's some great suggestions in there for you. And there's so many more I just didn't get time to mention. Paulownia, the foxglove tree, one of the fastest growing trees in the world. It looks like a giant mutated sunflower. That's a seriously impressive tree. And then there's Arundodonax, the giant Spanish reed, a plant again like a bamboo, huge screening potential, and it looks seriously tropical in summer. So really, just use this video as a guide, a place to start. Once you start building your own paradise, once you start discovering the huge range of plants that we can grow here in the UK, a whole journey awaits you. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If there's any other plants that you think need to be featured in the UK tropical garden, then leave them in a comment below. So thank you very much for watching. If you want any more info, check out my other vids, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later.